Now we are going to deep delve into situation. Joining us live from New York is political analyst John Kavalich. John, thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us here on Anews. We have one of the most important summits in this year, UNGA, in our hands. So let's start. What do we expect? A new day in New York. So what do you say about the environment? Let's start with that, and we are going to deep delve after that.
Well, first of all, good afternoon. To begin with the environment, it's not raining. So that's a good thing. Traditionally, during the UNGA, we have rain. So far, no rain, perhaps rain tomorrow. But if you put that together with what's happening within the UN General Secretariat building today, it's unfortunately going to be much as we've seen before, which is a lot of beautifully written speeches, beautifully delivered speeches, a lot of applause. And we have the headlines with respect to Palestine. We have the headlines Gaza, we have headlines Ukraine. But what happens next week? The UN General Assembly, the last of the speakers go Wednesday afternoon. What happens Tuesday? And unfortunately, I think that we're not going to be that far away from where we are this Tuesday.
Well, that is the question that we are having right now. So much. We're expecting so much. At least it's not raining. Yes, you have. That is interesting thing to mention, actually. Every single UNGA, we have rain in New York. So this time it's different. Maybe the situation will be different, or we are going to hear the raining news in a couple days as well. So let's keep up with that in the forecast as well. But our forecast for the diplomatic environment, for the diplomatic weather per se, what do we expect? We have the statements that has come from the countries, important countries, such as United Kingdom, France, Canada, Australia, saying that they have acknowledged the state of Palestine. We have Ahmed al-Shara in the United Nations. We have the speeches that we are expecting from Iran and how it is going to unfold. We still have an issue that we have to solve with Russia and Ukraine. We have President Trump wanting optics and probably getting optics, but we do not know which Trump we are going to get, the good one or the sour one. So we are really excited about that as well. That is one hectic UNGA. 18th one is, I don't know if it is going to be memorable for the world history, but it is going to be memorable as of the time that we are going through, and we are going to remember it to be one of the hectic ones. So recognition of Palestine. Let's start with that. What do we expect? What do we expect the tensions to be unfolding in the summit?
With respect to Palestine, it's been a really good 5 days for the Palestinian Authority, for the Palestinian people, and for those that are living in Gaza, because you now have, in totality, a majority of the 27 members of the European Union who are supporting, recognizing Palestinian statehood, Palestinian state. You have now two members of the G7, two members of the UN Security Council, meaning the UK and France, and that's fantastic. But the challenge is that until the 193 members of the UN General Assembly take control, meaning the majority rules, I don't know how much we're gonna see in terms of actual change. You could take, for example, the European Union. While Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, which is the organizational, operational, administrative arm of the 27 members of the EU, she has said, well, we're considering restricting imports from Israel. We're considering restricting certain relationships. But she can't do anything because the majority of the EU doesn't want it to happen. And we have at the UN General Assembly, the United States, which is going to block anything. So where I go with this is that, and this looks to President Erdogan, who has been the lonely child basically for 2 years, and he's finally seeing uh, seeing a result. He's finally got these heads of state and heads of government to say, do something. Now, verbally, they are. But then we get to, what does it actually mean for Gaza? What does it mean for the Palestinians? And until the majority of the UN General Assembly says, we're going to vote to expel Israel, we're going to vote to suspend Israel, and if the UN Security Council, those 5 permanent members, say no, we don't care. We're going to call a locksmith. We're going to call the programmers to deactivate the entry cards for the delegation from the state of Israel. We can do that in 30 minutes, and we're going to take control of the chamber. Until they do that, I just don't know how much of this is really going to mean anything when the Netanyahu government in Israel has said there is not going to be statehood, there is not going to be a state, so move on, people.
Well, John, when we consider the UNGA in that perspective, and we have been actually hearing the NATO General Secretary talking about what's going on in the world as well, so we are going to go back to that. But let's focus on the General Assembly for a while then. We have statements, we have people coming all around, and we have an important situation in our hands. As you have mentioned, it has been a good 5 days for Palestine, but also United States, sorry, so many Uniteds in here. United States did not accept the Palestinian leader to the UNGA. So do you think that any country is going to react to that? Because they have acknowledged Palestine to be a state, and now they want to see the leader, perhaps, and the leader isn't there. And it is because that United States did not accept it to be.
Yeah, and in that regard, you raise a really good example of the majority in the UN General Assembly. They voted, I believe it was on Sunday, for President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority to address in pre-taped remarks, to address the General Assembly in the spot in the program where he would normally be, despite the objections of the United States and Israel, and I believe there were a total of 10, so I think there were 8 others. So that's a moment where the General Assembly has actually done something contrary to the most powerful member of the UN General Assembly and the most powerful member of the UN Security Council. So in that regard, that was really good by sending that message. Now, the U.S., you're right. They refuse entries to the Palestinian delegation. There are legal scholars that will say that that's a violation of the treaty or the agreement that the U.S. has to host the UN. And the U.S. government has even gone as far with the Iranian delegation to say, well, you can come, the president can come, but don't you dare try to go to Costco, which is a big discount store, or go to Cartier or Tiffany. Don't try to buy any luxury goods. So now we're going to have people tailing the motorcade of the Iranian delegations to make certain that they don't buy a watch. So it becomes rather comical and performative. But for Palestine, a really good day, because it does show that the General Assembly can, when it wants to, do something that the U.S. doesn't want.
Well, yes, that is an important situation, and it brings us back to, maybe I'm biased, but it brings us back to the fact that world is bigger than 5, because the President Erdogan has been saying that for a while, and actually many of the countries are now talking about the practicality of the United Nations. They're not necessarily saying that United Nations should be dissolved, but they're saying that we need some reforms, and the reforms come with the United Nations being actually an equal platform, that the countries are being represented equally, because the world structure now needs that to happen. So what would you say that the statements are going to come? I know that President Erdogan is going to make his speech. What do you expect him to say, and what do you expect the other leaders to say about this inequality of the situation? Do you think that it is high time that United Nations becomes a platform that equality is the case for the world as in whole?
I think we're basically going to know, not basically, we're going to know what the week is going to look like from the first three speakers this morning, where we have President Lula of Brazil, we have President Trump, and we have President Erdogan. It's basically those three that are going to set the stage for what we're all going to be watching for the next week. And of course, President Erdogan on Thursday, I think at 11 a.m., has a meeting with President Trump at the Oval Office and at the White House in the Oval Office. But we're going to see President Lula, who has incredible differences with President Trump, talk where the U.S. has sanctioned Brazil, not necessarily for anything Brazil has done financially or commercially, but because of how the Brazilian government and the judiciary is dealing with former President Bolsonaro in terms of his conviction on an attempt to overthrow the government. President Trump likes Bolsonaro, so he's targeted Brazil because of that. Then President Lula is going to be talking about, what is democracy and what are internal affairs, and how should should governments respect one another's internal affairs. And using President Erdogan's statement, the world is larger than five, and there are regional groups that are developing. And this isn't 1945 and 1946. We've now moved from one century to the other, multiple decades. We need a new approach. Then President Trump's going to get up there, and likely we're going to hear the refrains. I've solved 7 wars. The U.S. is the hottest country in the world. A year ago, we were dead. We're using tariffs to make everyone fair because people have been taking advantage of us. Interesting to see, does he name names, or does he just sort of flow with these themes? But it's not going to be a happy speech. We all know that. It's going to be what degree of meanness and bulliness and anger and hostility, as he said on Sunday during a memorial service for the late political activist Charlie Kirk, when he said, "I'm sorry, but I hate my opponents." So basically, he looks at almost everyone, the other 192 members of the UN, those are his opponents, so he hates them all. Then we move to President Erdogan, who has been, the head of state that has been saying, pay attention to the people of Gaza, hold Israel accountable. And finally, he's going to be able to say, it's only taken me 2 years, but at least I now have some of you recognizing the state of Palestine, recognizing Palestinian statehood, doing something, but you're still not doing much to hurt Israel. You're just flapping your gums, which is fine, and it's a good part of the process. But what have you done to inflict pain upon Israel? And so far you haven't. UK government, gee, it was wonderful you didn't let Israeli government officials come to a defense industry trade fair, but you let Israeli companies go to the trade fair. So what are you going to do now? And then he's going to talk about the UN itself. The world is larger than five. In 2023 in New Delhi at the G20, he said it should be enlarged, the permanent members, and India should be the next one in. He'll talk about that. And then he's probably going to talk about just fairness and some of the issues that are happening. He'll talk about Ukraine and what the role that he feels Turkiye has played. And then we're going to move from there. So I think we're going to have 3 very strong leaders and who have executive authority. And they're basically going to set the mood for, I think, what we're going to see for the week.
Well, that's quite interesting perspective to look at when we consider all of these three leaders who are going to make the opening sort of the situation in the UNGA. And we know that the follow-up conversations are going to come and we are going to see a lot of headlines. But let's talk about President Trump, because that's not our conversation, is it? Without President Trump, we always come back to him. He's an interesting one, and we do not know how he is going to act, is he? Because he may act friendly, he may act angry. You were just leaning to the angrier part, I think. But what kind of Trump that we are expecting to see in the UNGA? Yes, he's probably, as you have mentioned, going to talk about the tariffs. Yes, he is going to say that he is trying to be quote-unquote fair. But there is also a Donald Trump who just was really into the idea of finishing off the Russia-Ukraine war before the UNGA. And here we are. It's unresolved. He said he's going to do it in a week. He said Vladimir, quote-unquote, is his friend. Now he's not really liking him. And we have him having interesting commentary every day. He calls the North Korean leader a rocketman, and then he calls him his best friend. So we have quite the conflict. What kind of Trump do we expect?
Yeah, there aren't a lot of Trump options to choose from. I think we're going to see the bully Trump. We're going to see the Trump that looks at that audience, and part of him says, I'm the consummate deal maker. I can make an agreement with any of the 192 people that are out there. But then there's that other side that we saw on Sunday where he said, my opponents, I hate them. So he looks at 192 people sitting there, and for him, they're all enemies until proven otherwise. And he is going to want to project what he feels is the most successful presidency in the history of presidencies, and his 8 months or 9 months in has done more than anyone else. And so the question will be not, is he going to target other countries, other groups of countries, but does he name names, or does he leave it generic? And that I don't know. But I think that we have to be confident that this isn't going to be Mr. Happy up on that podium. And one example or one clue we have is he is leaving tonight from New York after attending the UN leaders reception. He and Mrs. Trump are going back to Washington Tuesday. He has, I think, 2 or 3 bilaterals today. He's got one, multilateral, and then he's gone. So that sort of frames up how he looks at this UNGA as an opportunity to dialogue, not only with those that he has something in common with, those he likes, because there are some heads of state, tough guys, tough women that he likes, but also to engage with those he doesn't. He's going to see the president of Syria. That's, incredibly important. He's going to, see President Zelensky of Ukraine. Important. I think he's seeing the president of Argentina, who's here basically begging for financial handouts and that. But other than that, he's going to go home. And so I think that sort of tees up what to expect. We're going to see him flouting what he believes are his successes, criticizing those he believes are not aligning with his interests, and telling everyone that we're the biggest, we're the best, we're the brightest, and if you want to be a part of it, get in line.
Well, That's probably the Trump that we are going to see, and we are going to see the highlights, and we are going to see all of these headlines that we are going to discuss from. So, John, let's talk about the other actors as well. What do we expect? Who do we expect to be, for example, one of the influential ones? We know that Ahmed al-Shara's speech is quite expected because he is like the interim or not. He is in the Syria's ruling at the point. So this leadership is going to need to be heard from the world. And do you think that there are any expected and wondered speeches from the world leaders? Do you think that anything is going to come up the most?
Probably the most interesting ones to expect are certainly the president of Syria, because it's the first time in decades. And this is a man who the U.S. designated as a terrorist, as the head of a terrorist organization. And here he is. And he's also, from Turkiye's standpoint, this is a guy that led an organization not all aligned with the interests of the government of Turkey, but President Erdogan, basically the first one in when he replaced President Assad and said, Turkey is here, we've got mutual interests, let's have dialogue. Turkish Airlines flying into Damascus. And so he's really grabbed on to the president of Syria's new role. But everyone's going to be watching to see how he handles himself, and what his message is, to Israel, because the U.S. has placed enormous pressure on the government of Syria to, I'll use the word make peace, but make accommodations with Israel. Now, Israel had annexed the Golan Heights, which is part of Syria. They've also basically taken more of Syria with the stated purpose of that President Assad is gone, and so any agreements that they had with President Assad are gone, and so therefore we need more security. So what's going to happen there? And then what kind of support, financial support and political support Syria is going to get? The president of Iran is going to be an interesting speech, because we have the issues relating to the snapback on the sanctions that the European Union, G7, United States, the pressures, support for the Houthis, interactions with Saudi Arabia, with respect to oil. So there's all of that going on. And then we have President Macron, who yesterday hosted a event with respect to Gaza, and he's sort of taken the mantle of the producer and the director of what's happening at the UN with respect to Gaza, Palestine, Palestinian state. But unfortunately, at home, he's incredibly weak. His economy is weak. His new government is weak. He is out in a year and a half. So he's going to have, as the French do, it's a beautiful language, and he's going to be, saying some really nice things, but, what are they going to mean afterwards? So I think, from my standpoint, Syria, Israel, and France will be sort of the interesting ones to watch.
Let's see how they are going to come out next, and who's going to, if it is the France, Syria, or someone else, someone that we haven't been expecting, but makes such a statement that we are looking forward to it. So I'm going to make sure to talk to you about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are always the surprises. There are always the ones that analysts and others we're just not talking about. Yeah. And then it's just, wow, look at what that man or that woman, that head of state, head of government, minister said. And of course, at the end of the week, we've got Sergei Lavrov, foreign minister of Russia, be here. Secretary of State Rubio is going to be having a meeting with them. So we got that. I do want to say, as always at the UNGA, I'm very grateful that First Lady of Turkey includes me in some of her events. And yesterday she had one on food, Anatolian cuisine. And once again, really well done at Turkiye House, and a lot of people attending. And we had a chance to have another conversation that, interestingly enough, was about the media. But I did want to always say that I'm appreciative of that. And in the background, you can maybe see a few of the little gifts that they gave, which we've sort of made a tradition of showing.
Well, thank you, John. Let's see. Yes, I'm seeing the gifts, and that looks rich. So that's great. We have been talking about it in the past. Past UNGA, you had the gifts as well, as far as I remember. That looks really great. So let's hope that UNGA goes good for everyone, including you in New York. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will make sure to get updates from you as soon as possible.
Okay. Thank you.